Hello class, in this video we're going to pin textures onto our sculpted models and we're going to bake the texture maps. And in the end, we're going to have a game-ready low polygon model with a high-resolution texture maps. Alright, so let's get started. So first we're going to make a texture base layer. So we're going to save our sculpted model to step 4, texturing. And then we're going to select our step 1 file, the base mesh, and we're going to make a duplication and save it as step 5, apply textures. So this will be our final model with texture maps. So here we're going to select everything and export a UV snapshot and image format as PNG and wireframe as black color, and we're going to use this UV wireframe as a reference to make our texture base layer. So here we're going to create a background layer, fill it with the white color, and then we're going to lock both the UV and the background layer, and then we're going to drop in our textures. So first we're going to make the wood texture, and so this area is our wood area, and we can place our texture map here, and we're going to use a pen tool to draw a mask around this area, so only the wood will only show inside of this wireframe. Alright, and then make a selection and create a mask, and then we're going to create a wood texture for the other side. So it's always good that you switch between Maya and Photoshop, so you can reference the wireframe, you know where you need to draw the mask onto the textures. Alright, so now we had our wood texture, so we're going to put them in a folder and rename the folder, and then we're going to drop in our cloth texture. Scale it to a proper size, and we can duplicate them to extend this texture. And you can select all of them and hit Command E to merge them together. So on Windows computer you'll use Control E instead. Okay, and then here we're also going to make a selection, delete the actual areas. So we don't want the texture spill out to the other part of the model. And place the cloth texture underneath the wood texture, so you know the wood will be on the top. Okay, so once you get everything, and you know, just a double check to make sure your texture is accurate. And then we'll pack them together as a cloth folder, and we're going to save this texture image and save it as a PNG image, because we only want the wood and the cloth to be textured and in this step. And then we're going to move back to model box, and we're going to create a paint layer. And we're going to do import texture, and import the texture you just created and import to diffuse channel. So it's going to be the diffuse map. And here's how it looks. Okay, so it's a good start point for a texture. And then we're going to move on to diffuse map, and we're going to paint diffuse map. So here we're going to create a new layer, name it color, and we're going to use a paintbrush. We're going to paint color for the cloth. So here we're going to choose a dark red color as a color, and then just paint on your model, and make sure not spill the color onto the wood. And once you've done, we'll change the blending mode of the layer to multiply, so you're going to multiply the red color onto the cloth texture. And here we can name it to color cloth, because we're going to create a new color layer, and we're going to use that as the base color for our blade and gears. And here you can see that for the handle and top, their material is number 3, and all of the other objects, their material are number 1. So here we're going to assign the material to the other objects, to make sure all of the objects has the same material. And then we'll go back to the pin layer, the corner layer, and we're going to pin the base corner for the blade and the gears. So here I would like to choose a bright blue color. So it'll be the base color. And we can also use this color for its specular. So I'm going to show you later. So here's select all of the gears. And here we're going to paint a bright yellowish color to all of them. So this will be color 1. And we'll create a new pin layer as color 2. So here for all the gears, I will paint a orangish, a darker yellow color. And for the blade, I also paint a darker blue color. And then here for color 2, we're going to create a mask. So basically, we're going to paint some scratches on the color 2, and on the scratches, you're going to show the first color. So you're going to create a dramatic effect. So here we're going to load a stencil image for the scratches, and we're going to use a paintbrush color as a black color, so it's going to be the mask. The place we paint, it's going to mask out the color 2 layer, and it's going to show the color 1 layer, and it'll be shown as scratches. And here you can also load different scratch image as a stencil image to paint different scratches. And you can go to all the corners, the edges, and paint these scratches. Here also going to load a noise image as the as a stencil image, reference image to paint the mask on the blade. Alright, and then with a scratch layer, we're gonna paint on top of the noise to make the two textures blend together. Alright, and this is how it looks after I finish the scratches on the second color layer. And for the pattern, we can also load the pattern texture images as mask reference. And we're gonna invert the value so we can paint the black color onto the mask, onto the pattern area. And then you can select the scratches and uncheck the invert value so you can paint the scratches back onto the line. Okay, so the idea for here is basically we paint the color 2 layer back onto the pattern for the scratches. Okay, and this is how it looks. And then we're going to move on to the gears. So also we're going to select the mask layer on the color 2 layer, and we're going to paint some scratches around the edges. So paint the scratches along all of the edges, the hard edges on the gears, and those areas most likely the most parts to be scratches, to be scratched by other objects. And this is how it looks in the end. And you will repeat this process to paint texture the scratches onto all the other gears. Just to make them look more kind of different. And then we're going to pin the specular map onto our model to make the reflections. So basically the idea is for color 2 layer, I wanted to show kind of a dull texture, and color 1, which is a brighter color, I wanted to reflect lights. So I'll duplicate the color layer and move the duplication to specular channel. So for color 1, as you can see, the reflection is very intense. Okay, and then we're going to head over to color 2 and make a duplication, and also we're going to move it to specular channel. And here you can see we duplicate the layer, but it doesn't duplicate the mask with the layer. Okay, so we have to go over back to the color 2 layer and duplicate the mask, and also move it to the specular channel, and just drop it onto the color 2 layer, and it'll be the mask. So now we can see that the 2 different color layers has different reflectivity, and we can even intense the contrast by go to adjust the color and lower down the value of the color 2 layer. And now you can see that as we lower down the value, it will remove its reflectivity, right? So we want the bright color, the bright area to reflect more lights. So we want that area to be metal, and the darker area, it will be the paint on the X. Okay, so same idea for the gears. It will be reflect lights in the brighter area. So here I'll just rename all of the metal layers, specular layer and color layers, and I'm gonna lock all of the layers, and I'm gonna move on to the wood. So here for the wood, I'm going to select a kind of brownish color, and I'm going to create a new pen layer for the wood and change the layer blending mode to multiply. And here you can choose a noise as the stencil reference to pin some texture onto our the handle on the wood. So this is gonna pin some noise, the dark colors on the wood. And same thing for the top part of the handle. Okay, once you finish this, we're going to create a new layer and say wood color 2, and for this layer we're going to pin some scratches onto it. So also for this layer, we're going to change it to multiply blending mode, and we're going to choose a darker yellowish brownish color, and by doing that we're going to pin some scratches onto the handle. So as you can see, the metal gets scratches, and the wood will definitely get scratched too, because the warrior will carry this weapon for a lot of battles, so definitely will get scratches onto it. And then here we're going to create a new pinned layer on the specular channels. Basically this will be the wood specular map, the base specular. We make sure to lock all the other layers, and we don't want to spill our color to other objects. So here just to choose a dark gray color, so it will create some reflection but not too much, just a little. Then we can duplicate the 2 wood colors we have created and move them to specular channel, and place them on top and change their blending mode back to normal. Okay, and then you can drop down their value by go to adjust the color. So this will be served as the mask, and it will block the specular we just painted. Alright, and for the cloth is the same thing. We're going to create a new paint layer in the Diffuse Map channel, and here we're going to change the blending mode to multiply, and we're going to choose a dark red color. So the idea is here we can paint something, some dirt texture onto the cloth. The warrior carry this axe a lot and it get worn texture. Okay, it can be water, it can be dirt, it can be anything, on the cloth. And then we can just rename the layers, and we're going to duplicate the cloth layers and also bring them to the specular channel to create the specular reflections on the cloth. So for the first cloth layer, I'm going to drop the value down to -100, so we're going to remove all the reflections. And then for the second cloth color layer, I'm going to place it on top, change the blending mode to normal, so it's going to reflect lights on this area. And you can lower down the intensity, and here I just use a value about 55 or 53, something around there. Obviously you can do more values if you want it to be in a kind of water texture. And this is how it looks in the end. Now we're going to move on to bake our texture maps. So right click on the Diffuse Map channel. We're going to save it as a JPEG image and save it as the Diffuse Map draft. Since later on we're going to edit the image. And also we're going to save the specular channel to a specular draft texture. And then we're going to head over to Specular Map, and you can export each individual layer if you want more control on the Specular Map, which I'm going to explain later in this video. And for the metal layer, you'll need to export this mask as well, because remember we have created mask on the specular map. Okay, this is how it looks. Alright, and then we're gonna select all of the models. We're gonna go to extract the texture maps, new operation. I'm gonna export a normal map first. So add all selected model as the target, and then add them for the source model. And then for the method, we're going to choose the subdivision and generate one map for all targets, and image size as 2048, and save it as a normal map draft. Okay. And then with all of the models remain selected, you're going to go back to extract the texture maps. We're going to create a new operation, and this time we're going to select our ambient occlusion map and add selected for the target model and add selected for the source model. So you can compare the first level and the last level of the model and create the ambient occlusion shadow. Okay, quality as the best, matter as a subdivision, and we're going to use image resolution as 2048, so we have more detail on the image. Alright, so it took my computer for about 8 minutes to render the AO map, ambient occlusion map. So don't be panic if your computer doesn't respond and run very slow when exporting the AO map. And then by default, if you're going to load the AO and normal map, you can just hide them in your modelbox file, and you will show your model as the original look. And then we're going to pack our texture maps together. So drop the UV into Photoshop, and here we're going to bring in our diffuse map and bring in our ambient occlusion map. And for ambient occlusion map, we're going to change it to multiply. So we're going to darken the shadow area on our diffuse map, and you can lower down the opacity if you feel it's too intense. And put them in a folder, and we're going to name it as diffuse. And then drop in our normal map. So for the normal map here is a little bit tricky. As you can see, for the X, it looks good. It has all the textures. However, for the cloth, it has the wrinkle we painted, but it doesn't have the cloth textures, because it was a texture we imported. It is not something we have sculpted, right? So I'll go back to the texture base layer, and we're going to merge the wood folder and the cloth folder, and we're going to hold down Control and click on the wood icon to make a selection, and then we're going to delete that area on our cloth texture. Okay, and then we're going to merge everything together as one layer, and we're going to transfer this layer to a background layer, so we can apply a generate normal map effect onto it. So this is going to create a normal map. You can keep the default setting, and this is how it looks for the normal map. And then we can drop this normal map into our texture folder, texture file, and you can hide all of the layers and move this normal map in place. Make sure you check it on smart guides, so when you move the layer, you're going to show the reference line, so you'll know if the image is placed in the center. And then here we're going to go back to texture base layer, and we're going to make this cloth texture, use the crop to crop the whole image, so make sure we don't have anything outside of the frame, and then drop this whole thing to our texture file, and we're going to use it as a mask, use it as mask to delete the outside area of the texture normal map. Here we go. So basically, by doing this, we will crop out the outside cloth area, and then the cloth definitely is too intense, and we can lower down its opacity. And I always do about like a 12%. So you just add a little cloth texture on top of the wrinkles we have sculpted. And then we can put these two components into one folder and use it as a normal map. And for the Specular Map, it looks good, so we can just duplicate here and change the name to X Specular. So we're going to use it as a final map. And then we're going to bring in this Specular Map into our texture file. We're going to invert the color, and we're going to change the hue saturation, the saturation back to 0. So we're going to make it as a black and white image. So basically, we're going to make a roughness map from this Specular Map. So for roughness map, basically the white color will not reflect any light, the black area will reflect lights. And then if you want to customize your roughness map, remember we have exported all of those separated specular channels in Modbox. So here we can drop them in, and we can edit each image. So for example, if you want a particular area to reflect more lights, you can select that specific layer, and you can lower down its value to make it darker. And if it is a pure black, it will reflect 100% of the lights. If you make it a pure white color layer, and you will not reflect any lights. Okay, so this is the scratches we painted on the wood. Now, if you make it a black color, you're going to reflect lights, but if you make it a white color, it will not reflect any light. Okay, so that's how you would customize your roughness map. And then after we get all these three maps, we're going to export them separately. And then you will have these 4 maps, so we're going to use these 4 maps for our final model. And then we're going to move on to our apply texture model. So this will be our final model. So select everything and apply soften edge. So you're going to soften the hard edges, right? And if you are creating animation or doing rendering in Maya, so here you can just create a new material and drop all of the 4 texture maps and apply, and then you can create animation and render. And for game use, you can freeze transformation, delete history, and then select everything and export the model as a FBX file. And then for the FBX file with the 4 texture maps we have created, you can bring this model to any gaming engine and it will work perfectly. And then for next video, we're going to move on to Substance Painter and we're going to render some good quality images for our X model.